Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Grow RDH podcast. Today we have a repeat guest. I think this is the first time I've had a repeat guest, so
Yes.
that's exciting. Kaylynn is on with us again, and if you remember, Kaylynn came on to talk to us about assisted hygiene and how that works in her office. And so now we get to chat about being an Enneagram 8. And what's interesting is that I am also an 8. And me and Kaylynn definitely have shared some of those experiences that maybe only Enneagram 8s can, relate to. So this will be a especially fun one for me just because, again, we share a lot of the same traits. So it'll be interesting and kind of fun to hear from somebody else who experiences those same things. So to start off, again, I'm just going to read a little bit of an intro about what Enneagram 8s are like and some of their core motivations. So we'll start with that. Enneagram 8s are bold, assertive, and natural leaders who value independence and control. And I know I've talked a lot about control on the podcast before, so control for me is really important. They're driven by the desire to protect themselves and others, often advocate fiercely, and sometimes that can come off as aggression. But when they're in that aggression state, it's because they truly believe that what they are feeling or thinking is right. 8s are resourceful, confident. They thrive in positions of influence and responsibility. At their best, they inspire and empower others, but they can also struggle with being overly confrontational, controlling, or dismissive of vulnerability. Their core fear is being weak or powerless, and their core desire is to assert strength and independence while maintaining control over their environment. So with that, Kaylynn, for those who haven't listened to the assisted hygiene, do you want to quick just introduce yourself, tell us about your dental hygiene career thus far and kind of where you're at?
Yeah. Again, Kaylynn. So, I work at an office here in Sioux Falls, and I've been a hygienist for going on 5 years. Been at the same office, so it's been really fun to kind of grow there. And I've had a lot of opportunities to, use my 8 and kind of advance my career with my team. And I'm actually in a leadership role now as a team lead for the hygiene department. And I work closely with our doctors and our CEO on pretty much anything that can just kind of help advance our team, bring more team building skills and things like that to kind of get that collaboration with everybody together.
Perfect. So we're going to start with strengths because I think we need to start with the positives, then we'll get into some of the negatives, and then we'll end with positives and I sandwich it in between, right?
Sounds perfect.
So let's start with the positives. Obviously, 8s are strong leaders, but they are strong leaders because they like to advocate. And again, when they feel like something is right, they want to make it right.
Mhm.
Sometimes that can be in an assertive way. So, you are in a big leadership role in your office. How have you seen some of your Enneagram 8 traits kind of prepare you or get you into this role of leadership? What are some of the main things that you value in yourself that you see that make you a strong leader?
Yeah, evidence-based decision making is kind of like my best friend. So anytime like we'll do, team case studies or really kind of bring those factors kind of into learning. So for instance, like our the perio guidelines, for sure. You can see all these factors that are at play with a patient and then kind of implementing that into a case study together. Like there are all of these areas of gray, but kind of following that, it's like there's a guideline. I can just follow the guide and I know that this is right. I know this is going to work, and kind of using that to weed out the gray and just make sure that this is what's happening. This is what we see, and this is how we're going to treat it.
Yeah, I love that. In what scenarios or when do you feel the need to maybe take charge, or when have you been able to speak up for coworkers or fellow hygienists as the hygiene lead?
I think like when it came for our office, we just did an office wide like pay raise to kind of get us close to the state. Comes back to that evidence of we have all of this knowledge and we have all this time that we spend in school and continuing education, that we are very knowledgeable people. Let's use that to our advantage. And with how much the state of South Dakota itself has changed in what that looks like, especially for pay, coming across and saying, hey, let's implement something that we can really not only say, hey, I'm intelligible about this, but I'm rewarded for my work and my knowledge too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And again,
Um,
going back to evidence, that's just more proof, right?
mhm.
Evidence is the best way to make a case for yourself. And if you can show in the evidence, like this is the state average of pay, or this is what, all the other hygienists are making, kind of to get that pay equity, you can't deny evidence,
Yeah,
right? You can deny feelings, you can downplay feelings, but you can't deny evidence. Evidence is what it is.
yeah. And I feel like for
Yeah.
our office itself too, we do a lot of like check-ins throughout the year, to see how our staff is doing. And it's like bringing out points in each individual, like this is how you're succeeding and this is why you're doing so well in these areas. And the other side of that, here's areas that you should really be working on, or what are what steps that we can take to make sure that you are meeting this standard, and then reaping those benefits as well.
Yeah, for sure. How has your independence or maybe your need for control and lack of vulnerability, how has that played a part when it comes to maybe patients? So we've talked about coworkers. How has that played a role in your ability to sort of connect with patients? Or, it may be a little tricky. It's harder to, when you can't control the situation. Sometimes for me, that feels difficult. I'm like, come on, this is what I'm telling you. Don't
Mm-hmm.
you believe me?
Yes. Yeah, oh my gosh. It's a struggle sometimes, for sure, especially if someone is they only see you as a tooth cleaner, and it gets really difficult. It's like, hey, I actually know that XYZ medication can have this effect on your mouth, which is leading to this happening, which is why you feel like this going on. And it's not just the fact that you're not brushing all the time or whatever, but I kind of really lean into bringing in like photos and x-rays and just really kind of diving into not necessarily too sciencey on it, because it's so easy to lose a person when they're like, I don't know what this means. So just kind of really relating it to the patient themselves. I have found that the more open I am about what's actually happening and being relatable as a person, bringing in my own life experience and saying, hey, this has happened to me, I know what you're going through. And of course, having the patient base behind me with all the other patients that I've seen, all the things that I've studied in school and you know in continuing education, and actually being able to apply it and falling back on that evidence. That's kind of just how I really just operate on everything. Is there's a system, there's these things that are in place that kind of bring us to this spot, and how can we go from there. But in regard to being vulnerable, kind of owning the fact that I know, coming back to it, I know that this is a proven something or another. This is a proven study. This is tangible material that I can bring to you and say, hey, this is why.
Yeah. All right. So lots of good strengths, right? We are assertive, we're leaders, we advocate. We also can come across negative, like those can come across in a negative way. And so let's talk a little bit about how sometimes that might impact our relationships with our coworkers or our patients. From a personal, just curious, have you ever been called bossy or straight up a bitch?
Not at work to my face, but in relation, like especially in relationships or friendships, like I like to make a decision and see the result, make it happen. And when people or in relationships, if it's kind of like a she could be this, let's do this maybe, and it's like let's do a straight up answer and go for it. Let's dive in. And it's like I definitely get the feel of not hearing everybody's, thoughts or feelings and taking that into account. A part of my brain is trying to process how somebody else might feel about it in a situation, but I just kind of like word vomit, and we're just like we're diving in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really difficult. And what I find interesting, again, this is just me speaking personally about my own personal experiences, but a lot of the times, things that I do when I'm asserting myself as a woman I have been told I'm very bossy or I am only thinking one track mind. And to me, that's how I get results. My one track mind is this is how I get things done. And it's almost like it's tunnel vision and you kind of clear out all of the peripheral. You don't see that. So as a woman, sometimes it's frustrating because you see maybe men in leadership roles that are doing the same thing that are kind of, seen as very successful. That's a great leader, that's a great boss, all of this stuff. And sometimes as a, coming from a woman, we're not supposed to act like that, or we're not supposed to assert ourselves in the same way. And so that to me is one of the biggest frustrations I've experienced trying to kind of navigate the career ladder or the career path. Have you experienced anything similar?
Thankfully, not with my bosses,
Yes,
but
yes.
even with patients, sharing my own personal life on like what I do in my spare time. I'm a doer. There's a project that I want to do. I'm going to get it done. So I will do the research, figure out how to get it done and do it. And they're like, well, why doesn't your husband do this? Why don't you just hire somebody to do this? And I was like, well, I know how to do it now. I'm going to just do it.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see it in that respect. Coincidentally, I have one of my main bosses. He's also an 8. So
Oh,
a
funny.
lot of our experiences, we're just like, we just know. Like I feel like we're just on the same page with a lot of things. And it's definitely, hey, this is the goal. Let's take these steps and then get it done without any feelings involved. And, you kind of think of women in the same sense. There's a lot of feelings that have to be taken into account of, I feel like, as I'm talking about feelings.
Lots,
So it's
lots of feelings.
in a field that is primarily female driven, it's hard to, I feel, take the way my brain operates, my personality, and get the feeling side of it. And I think that maybe you totally get that too.
100%, 100%. I mean, we could be like in a strategic planning sort of mode where we're working on a project. And that's what kind of bogs me down is that there's so many like opinions or feelings about things. Well, what if this and what if this? My brain doesn't work like that. So I'm just like seeing the result
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, no, I understand, but I don't, but let's go.
Yes, yes. Let's skip the little things and get to the big picture.
Yes, exactly. And again, as you said, dental hygiene is very female dominated. Thankfully, we do have a lot more males in the profession than I think we did in the past, but it's still, that is a lot of feelings. There are a lot of feelings floating around, and that makes it hard. It makes it hard I love that your boss is an 8 too, though,
Yeah.
because that means like he gets it and he's on the same driven, path forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. That has to make things hopefully easier. That's
So
awesome.
I think we're like the only 8s in my office. We actually did a team building Enneagram for each department. We did assistants, we did hygiene and admin, and yeah, I think he and I were the only 8s. So it was like, hey, this makes total sense.
I'm so curious. For the hygienist in your office, what was the breakdown? Did you have a lots of
I
2s and
actually
3s?
saved it on my phone, so let me pull it up real quick.
Oh, perfect.
It was just
Perfect.
cool.
It's crazy because as you're looking that up, even preparing for these interviews, everybody that's responding to me to do the interviews, 2, 3s, and 9s. That's all we are.
Yep.
And I say that no, it's not all we are, but oh my goodness.
So in our office, we had type 2 was the top, and then we had quite a few type 6s, and then a handful of 9s. So 2 6s and 9s for our office.
So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, going on feelings, we talked a lot about feelings.
Hmm.
So, again, we're just going to highlight one of our weaknesses. One, I think the top weakness for me is like being too assertive and not caring about feelings. But that leads into my second weakness is vulnerability and how important it is. We taught in school how important it is to be empathetic to patients, and that requires us to be vulnerable, right? If we want to make that connection and build trust. I am absolutely the world's worst person at sharing vulnerability. And so sometimes, maybe more in my personal life, but also in my professional life, even like asking for help or delegating, we just interviewed a 3 and we talked about delegating. Everybody has, like, other types don't want to delegate either, but it's for different reasons. So for me, I don't want to delegate because I want everybody to think that I can do it. I can have it. I can do it all. I don't, if I delegate, to me, that means I'm showing weakness.
I failed.
Yes. So, talk to me about vulnerability, how you've either been successfully able to show vulnerability, or maybe that's something you struggle with. What does vulnerability look like to you?
In the sense of patient education, I've been able to like mental barrier myself and be as open as possible with my patients and kind of sharing in that sense. But in delegation, that's that's so hard for me to do. Like I was just saying, it feels like I have failed if I'm unable to complete something or get it to a point of satisfaction for myself without burning out and asking for help, then it's like, why'd I even start this if I'm gonna fail at doing it? You know,
Right.
the whole failure aspect of it, just that's what gets me in the
Hmm.
sense of that being vulnerable is just vulnerable, it's fail. And my husband can attest. Trying to me asking for help, he's like I'm gonna be there and thankfully he's very supportive and understanding. But yeah,
Yeah. So, and that's interesting. So, I don't. Have you ever read The Road Back to You?
no,
It's
have not read that one.
okay. So that's they have like a study guide, and I've done it a few times with a few different groups of friends. And one of the things that they say, like, if you are in a relationship with an 8, either a professional relationship, personal relationship, like, the best thing you can do to sort of gain trust with them is help without letting them know you're helping. because
Yeah,
because because to us, like, asking for help, and again, comparison, right? So a perfectionist, a type 1, they want control because they want it done in a certain way in a certain time, right? They're perfectionists. For me, it's not about getting it done the way I want it. Like, it's not necessarily a control thing. It's that I don't want to look weak. So if it's going to show to you my weakness, right? Or my inabilities. And so to me, the control part comes from I want to show that I am in control. So as an 8, as somebody that's in a relationship with an 8, like, if you can help them sort of without highlighting their weaknesses, that goes a long way in, like,
hmm
oh, maybe I do need help, or maybe I can be vulnerable without this fear of, like, judgment, or I'm not performing as I need to.
yeah, yeah. The hidden help. That's the stuff.
Yes, right? Okay, so let's talk about then how that, so vulnerability with patients, you said, is something you've successfully been able to do. How about with coworkers then? Are you able to show vulnerability to your coworkers?
Kind of difficult. I feel like again, it's like my own personal just barrier in my mind in the sense of like I don't know. It's hard to explain. Yes and no. Like getting things done for them, to help them figure something out, co-diagnosis, things like that. There's just methods that I can follow.
Like, if a hygienist came to you and was having maybe a conflict
hmm
or a personality issue with somebody else,
Yeah.
do you struggle, or how do you help them with feelings when maybe we struggle with feelings ourselves?
Yeah. I would say probably to like redirect. I try to bring it up in a way where maybe the way that their brain works could be more of an efficient way for them to kind of resolve an issue. For instance, like you're saying, if there is something going on that this person specifically doesn't like another person is doing or going through, I try to kind of bring up, hey, yes, this is bothersome, but, try to think of it. Are they going through something? Maybe it's their own frustration or anger somewhere else is being redirected into their job and towards us, and kind of taking everybody, taking that with a grain of salt, giving people grace. And, if it's affecting like job performance or if it's affecting, their day to day, what are some things that we can do to maybe necessarily block the situation or give some space between some employees if it's really come to a point where that understanding and grace has come to a point where it just can't, that doesn't work anymore. What are some things that we can do in that kind of sense?
Yeah. And I think that maybe your weaknesses can kind of become a strength in this setting, right? Because you're able to objectively remove yourself from your
Yeah.
feelings.
I'm not directly
And
involved in it.
exactly. So you maybe are able to help them more objectively, like, okay, remove yourself from the situation, think about it. It's crazy how much just time, right? Just letting it lie and returning can help a lot of personality. I think when you're in the heat of the moment, you get in that fight or flight, you default back to your weaknesses, which to some people is to get defensive, to some people is feel like a victim. Whereas if you can remove yourself and let your body regulate, get out of that fight and flight, then you can better objectively think about it. And I think that's where we do have a strength in that,
Yeah.
is that I'm very shut off from my emotions anyway. So
Yeah.
it's easy for me to detach from them and think objectively. So yeah, I guess that's kind of turning it back into a strength.
Yeah. I would agree. And I think sometimes too, people just want to be heard. They just need to talk it out. And if they can just give that to me and like share all of their feelings, I'll just absorb the feelings and just dissipate it, like taking your frustration out. I'm here to listen to you, give your frustration. And like you said, gives them time, gives them that release and taking them out of like the fight or flight mode. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so I have an interesting like last question. In the past, like I always ask like what would you recommend to, people with the same type? I'm going to switch it up
Okay.
because the funniest thing I've ever heard about Enneagram 8s, it was, can't remember them. If I can remember it, I'll link the video. But the funniest thing I've ever heard about an Enneagram 8 is that if you are in a relationship with an Enneagram 8, you have to wear a hard hat. And I want to kind of dispel those rumors. So I'm going to switch this up and say, what advice do you have to others when dealing with an 8 to make us seem like less intimidating or less scary? How do you like want people to approach you, or how do you want people to feel about working with you?
That I'm approachable.
Yeah.
Yeah, like come talk to me. Like come talk to me about anything, and again, like I think it comes back to the whole emotion thing is like I have emotions and feelings? Absolutely, but I'm able to like hear things and not immediately have a reaction to it, regardless of what it is. Like, I've had some people, they're like, oh, this, I don't want this to be offensive. I don't, and I'm like, I'm the most unbothered person. Like,
It
please,
won't be.
like, I won't be, but I won't be offended. Please just let it out. And I've even said that
Yeah.
to some of my patients. They'll come in and they're like, don't be offended. I hate being here. And I'm like, I know it's not me that you don't hate me, and
Yeah.
then I definitely kind of flip that around and just say I understand it's you don't like being here and kind of relating to them, and we've all had stuff that we don't want to do, but so I think just go in with trying to be open about other people, going without having pre-made thoughts or prejudices or whatever you want to say, coming up to somebody and just being like, we're just going to chit chat or whatever.
Right. Exactly. I know. I do. I just want to be approachable. And
Yeah.
sometimes I have to like even check like my body language or my facial expressions because students have said like, you're so intimidating. And I'm like, I just don't think I am, but if that's what they're getting, again, I think because we just don't care, not that we don't care,
Sure.
but because we're hard to offend, we also think everybody else is hard to offend, right? They're just like, we're just saying the way it is.
Yep.
We're not trying to offend you, we're just saying it. So yeah, I think too it's like, how do we connect, or how do we put ourselves in those shoes even when it comes out in the moment, you're just like, ooh, that was a little harsh.
Yeah. And I feel like it's so easy to see in like a relationship. Again, I'm going to bring up my husband because like when we have discussions or anything, I'm like, we're straight to the point. I'm going to say how it is, regardless about how you feel about it. And, that's just been one thing that we've really grown with is he's kind of learned that, kind of back to that hard hat thing. You don't need the hard hat. Just, that this is going to happen. I don't mean anything by it. And,
Yeah.
so I have definitely had to learn personally how to blockade that part of being just straightforward with everybody.
Yeah.
Because if it's somebody that you've never met, or again, like you were saying, we automatically just think that everybody can just accept what we're talking about and just understand it. Coming back into especially the leadership role, you can't just go up to someone and say straightforward, this is what it is and this is what we're doing, when their brain processes and it's like, wait a sec, like what's actually happening. um,
Yeah.
and that's why one thing I was really excited to do it as a team. So, not only just so everyone can kind of see where we are on the scale, but for me to process in a leadership role, how am I going to discuss with my threes or discuss with my twos or sixes on their understanding when my brain is at the end result already, when they need the step to get to that end result.
Yes, especially with a six. Wow, that is so interesting because sixes they are always the questioners. They want to know every single detail before even considering something else. And we are just the complete opposite. I would say sixes and eights are probably at the way opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to moving forward or getting things done. But when sixes believe in something or understand something, they are super supportive in where you're going.
Yeah.
So great teammate because they kind of keep us in check, right? I have a really good friend that's a six and she is always keeping me in check. She is like the angel on my shoulder
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like the devil on my shoulder. And she's always like, Katie. So I love that. I think that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's been really great. I'm very thankful for my teammates, and I try to express that as much as possible whenever we do team building stuff or whatever. It's just appreciating them for everything that they do and their understanding and acceptance of me as well. It goes both ways.
Yeah, it really does. And that's why I think it's so important to understand the motivations behind all of these. Because I do think the more you understand why people are reacting the way they are, the more empathetic you can be. Because if I understand that you just need time, or you need to process your feelings, or you need things done in a perfectionist way, or something like that, you just understand better about why people are doing what they're doing. And it just helps you so much. So that's why I love the Enneagram.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Let us know down below in the comments if you've worked with innate, if you are innate, what are your favorite things about being innate, or what have you learned? How have you learned to manage an eight and all of our control issues? So thank you so much, Kaylynn, for your time. And we will see you guys on the next one when we talk to an Enneagram